Imagine a battlefield where no shots are fired, no armies clash, yet empires rise and fall with the stroke of a pen. These aren't the wars of kings or generals, but of merchants, magnates, and moguls fought in ledgers, contracts, and courtrooms. They've reshaped economies, redrawn maps, and redefined power, often without a single drop of blood spilled. From the spice-laden ships of the 17th century to the digital empires of today, these bloodless wars of business have altered the course of history more profoundly than many armed conflicts. They reveal the raw mechanics of capitalism, how ambition, innovation, and ruthless strategy can forge the world we live in. Welcome to the story of the bloodless wars that changed history forever. To understand these invisible battles, we must step back to the dawn of modern commerce, in the age of exploration during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Europe was awakening from the medieval era, driven by a thirst for wealth from distant lands. Spices like pepper, nutmeg, and cloves weren't just flavorings. They were more valuable than gold, preserving food, masking spoilage, and symbolizing status. The Portuguese had pioneered sea routes around Africa to India and the East Indies. But by 1600, the Dutch and English were hungry to challenge that dominance. Key figures emerged: visionary entrepreneurs, backed by monarchs and investors. In the Netherlands, the United Provinces formed the Verenigde Oostindische Company, or VO, CETA, Dutch East India Company, in 1602. It was the world's first multinational corporation, with a charter granting it quasi-sovereign powers to wage war, negotiate treaties, and even coin money. Across the Channel, the English East India Company, EIC, was founded in 1600 under Queen Elizabeth I, starting as a modest joint stock venture. These weren't mere trading outfits. They were engines of empire, blending commerce with colonialism. The system they operated in was mercantilism, where nations hoarded wealth through trade surpluses and protected monopolies. Joint stock companies allowed investors to pool risk, issuing shares that could be traded, birthing the modern stock market. Amsterdam's exchange buzzed with VOC shares, while London's coffee houses became informal trading hubs. But beneath this innovation lurked fierce rivalry: the Dutch, with their naval prowess and aggressive tactics, versus the English, who played a longer game of persistence and adaptation. This set the stage for the first great bloodless war of business, the spice trade. Rivalry that would reshape global trade and sow the seeds of European imperialism. Let's dive into the heart of this conflict: the cause. Control over the lucrative spice trade from the Indonesian archipelago, known as the Spice Islands. The VOC, under leaders like Jan Pieter Cohen, adopted a brutal efficiency. They monopolized production by destroying rival plantations, forcing exclusive contracts with local rulers, and using force when needed, though the core war was economic. By 1621, the VOC had seized the Banda Islands, exterminating or enslaving much of the population to secure nutmeg supplies. But against the EIC, it was a game of market dominance. The EIC, initially outmatched, faced constant harassment. Dutch ships blockaded English factories, and in the infamous Amboina massacre of 1623, though violent, it stemmed from commercial espionage accusations. But the real battle was financial. The VOC flooded markets with spices to undercut prices, forcing the EIC to retreat from Indonesia and pivot to India for textiles and tea. This cause-and-effect dynamic revealed a surprising pattern: short-term aggression versus long-term resilience. The Dutch invested heavily in forts and fleets, achieving early monopoly profits. VOC dividends averaged 18% annually for nearly 200 years, but overextension led to corruption and debt. Financial logic drove it all. Spices yielded margins up to 1,000%. Buy cheap in Asia, sell dear in Europe. The VOC's joint stock model raised 6.4 million guilders initially, allowing scale that individual merchants couldn't match. Yet the EIC's adaptability paid off. By the 18th century, it dominated India, leading to the British Raj. The impact? This rivalry accelerated globalization, shifting power from Mediterranean trade to Atlantic routes, and established corporations as extensions of state power. It changed history by fueling the wealth that powered the Industrial Revolution and colonial expansions. Compare this to today. Think of big tech's battles for data dominance. Just as the VOC and EIC fought for spice routes, companies like Amazon and Alibaba vie for e-commerce supremacy, using algorithms to undercut rivals and lock in suppliers. The lesson? Monopolies breed innovation but invite backlash, much like how the EIC's eventual triumph led to the Opium Wars, a darker chapter we'll touch on later. Fast forward to the mid-19th century, post-Civil War America, the nation was healing, expanding westward, and industrializing rapidly. Railroads were the lifeblood. They connected farms to factories, coasts to frontiers, and dreams to dollars. But building them required colossal capital, leading to the rise of the railroad baronsmen like Cornelius Vanderbilt, Jay Gould, and James J. Hill. The system? Laissez-faire capitalism, with government land grants subsidizing tracks but minimal regulation, creating a wild west of finance. The core rivalry, the Erie Railroad War of 1868, pitting Vanderbilt against the notorious duo of Daniel Drew, Jim Fisk and Jay Gould. Vanderbilt. The Commodore had built a fortune in shipping before pivoting to rails, controlling the New York Central. He sought to acquire the Erie Railroad for a monopoly on routes to Chicago. Drew, Erie's treasurer, his allies fought back with financial chicanery, watering stock issuing, unauthorized shares to dilute value, and bribing legislators. Cause and effect unfolded dramatically. Vanderbilt bought Erie shares en masse, driving prices up. Gould and Fisk countered by printing 100,000 new shares illegally, flooding the market and crashing the price, a classic short squeeze in reverse. Vanderbilt lost millions but sued. The rivals fled to New Jersey with $7 million in cash, setting up a fort to evade arrest. The war ended in a settlement, but patterns emerged: speculation over substance. Rail barons used stock watering, predatory rate wars slashing fares to bankrupt competitors, and pools' secret agreements to fix prices. The financial logic? Railroads were capital-intensive. Returns came from volume and monopolies. Vanderbilt's strategy? Consolidate inefficiency, cutting costs to dominate. Gould's? Manipulation and quick flips, earning him the Mephistopheles of Wall Street moniker. Impact on history? These wars built America's transcontinental network over 200,000 miles by 1900, fueling economic growth from $2 billion GDP in 1860 to $13 billion by 1900. But corruption scandals like Credit Mobilier led to the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, the first federal regulation of business. Modern parallels abound. Today's ride-sharing war, Uber versus Lyft eco rate, undercutting in investor battles, burning cash for market share, or consider high-speed rail debates. The barons' legacies remind us how infrastructure monopolies can spur growth, but demand oversight to prevent abuse. By the 1870s, oil was the new spice. Kerosene lit homes, lubricants greased machines. Discovery in Pennsylvania sparked a boom, but chaos reigned with wildcat drillers and volatile prices. Entered John D. Rockefeller, a meticulous bookkeeper turned tycoon, founding Standard Oil in 1870 with Henry Flagler. The rivalry. Standard versus independent refiners. Rockefeller's strategy: secret rebates from railroads. Via the South Improvement Company cartel, he negotiated discounts up to 50% off shipping rates in exchange for volume guarantees, crippling rivals' costs. Predatory pricing followed: slash prices in competitive markets to force sales or bankruptcies, then buy them cheap. Cause and effect. By 1879, Standard controlled 90% of U.S. refining. Surprising pattern: efficiency, masked ruthlessness. Rockefeller standardized quality, reduced waste using byproducts for paraffin, and vertically integrated from wells to retail. Financial logic: economies of scale. $1 million Australian dollars investment yielded 30% returns. Monopolies allowed price hikes, post-consolidation, but backlash brewed. Ida Tarbell's Idoling Civ Expose in McClure's magazine detailed the octopus squeezing competitors. The 1911 Supreme Court breakup under the Sherman Antitrust Act splintered Standard into 34 companies like Exxon, Chevron paradoxically increasing Rockefeller's wealth to $900 million, over $400 billion today adjusted. Historical impact: birthed modern antitrust law, curbing monopolies while fostering competition, that drove innovation like gasoline for cars? This war changed history by balancing capitalism's excesses, influencing global regulations. Today, Echo and Big Tech, Google's search dominance, or Amazon's logistics rebates mirror Rockefeller's tactics. The DOJ's cases against them invoke Standard Oil, showing how historical lessons guard against trusts stifling progress. The early 20th century saw the automobile transform society, from horse-drawn carriages to mass mobility. Henry Ford revolutionized it with the Model T in 1908, using assembly lines to drop prices from $850 to $260 by 1925, producing 15 million units. The rivalry: Ford's one-model dominance versus General Motors' diversified assault. GM, founded by William Durant in 1908, acquired brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac.
But chaos led to his ouster.
Alfred Sloan took over in 1923, introducing a car for every person purpose from cheap Chevys to luxury Buicks. Cause and effect: Ford's stubborn focus on the black Model T ignored consumer desires for variety. Sales plummeted from 57% market share in 1921 to 28% by 1927. GM countered with annual model changes, credit financing via GMAC, and targeted marketing patterns of planned obsolescence and segmentation. Financial logic: Ford's mass production cut costs but limited revenue. GM's strategy boosted margins through upselling, with profits soaring 1,000% in the 1920s. Impact: This war democratized cars, building suburbs, highways, and oil dependency, reshaping urban landscapes and economies. By World War II, U.S. auto output hit 3 million annually, powering wartime production. Modern ties: Tesla versus legacy automakers echoes this, disrupting with EVs like Ford did with affordability. It underscores how adaptability trumps rigidity in evolving markets. The late 20th century's information revolution mirrored earlier booms. Personal computers emerged in the 1970s-80s, with Microsoft Bill Gates and Apple Steve Jobs clashing early, but the pivotal, bloodless war, the browser wars of the 1990s, Netscape versus Microsoft. Netscape Navigator dominated in 1995 with 80% share, charging for software. Microsoft, seeing the internet threat to Windows, bundled Internet Explorer free in 1995. Predatory integration, cause and effect: Netscape's revenue crashed. By 1998, IE held 99%. Patterns: Network effects, where user base creates value, locked-in winners. Financial logic: Microsoft's OS monopoly funded embrace, extend, extinguish, copy, improve, dominate. The 1998 antitrust suit accused bundling. Microsoft settled in 2001, but the war spurred open source like Firefox. Impact: It accelerated the web's growth, enabling e-commerce and social media, changing history by digitizing economies, with global internet users hitting billions. Today, App Store battles Apple versus Epic Games. Replay this, with antitrust scrutiny echoing Microsoft's case. It highlights how platform control shapes innovation. As we reflect on these bloodless wars from spices to silicon, they reveal timeless truths. Business battles drive progress, competition sparks invention, monopolies force efficiency, but unchecked power invites regulation. They've built our world: global trade, infrastructure, mobility, digital connectivity, while teaching caution against excess. The insightful takeaway? In today's era of AI rivalries and crypto clashes, understanding these historical lessons equips us to navigate finance wisely, recognize patterns. Adaptability wins over rigidity, ethics temper ambition, and regulation balances growth. History isn't just past. It's a map for modern financial understanding, reminding us that the greatest wars are often won not by force, but by foresight. Thank you for joining this journey. If these stories resonated, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Till next time, remember, in business as in history, the pen is mightier than the sword.